cheek. The landline transformers column reflects what many truckers saw as the utter short-sightedness and disrespect of the ELD mandate. They are strong, vigorous, essential workers on whom a great deal, perhaps the fate of humanity, depends. Yet, in their view, they are being hemmed in by a ridiculous device that prevents them from doing their jobs, and we will all pay for it in the long run. This book examines how truckers' work is being affected by this proliferation of surveillance technologies. These technologies are part of an emerging regime of digital enforcement, the use of technology to enforce rules, both legal regulations and organizational directives, more perfectly than might otherwise be possible. In trucking, digital enforcement confronts the existing social order of the industry. It upends the occupational autonomy truckers have traditionally held, reconfigures information flows within trucking firms, alters how truckers and law enforcement officers interact with one another, and creates new sites of contestation and resistance. The economic realities of trucking have long depended on truckers' discretion, including flexible record-keeping routines and the ability to direct their own work in the face of unpredictable and often inhospitable conditions. But digital enforcement doesn't address these realities. It papers over them. In this book, I examine the social consequences of this approach. Are rules made to be broken? The rationale behind the ELD mandate is that electronic logs take the non-compliance issues off the table, as one trucking executive put it, making it much less feasible for truckers to break the hours of service rules. We might, of course, accept this goal as normatively desirable and relatively uncontroversial. If we have rules in place for safety reasons, at which we have arrived through legitimate political processes, and those rules are easily broken, why shouldn't we enforce them more consistently if we can do so? Aren't rules rules? In fact, it's not so simple. Rules aren't always rules. Rules are shaped by social, cultural, and economic realities and are almost never as simple as they might seem on paper. As an intuitive example, consider how you'd feel if you were ticketed by a police officer for driving 66 miles per hour when the speed limit is 65. Officially, you've broken the rule, but the violation is so trivial and the rule is so commonly broken that to-the-letter enforcement would very likely strike us as unfair and unreasonable. Further proving the point, the policing of minor speed violations is often merely a pretext, that is, a disingenuous excuse for police to stop and investigate drivers, particularly black drivers, for other reasons. But there's an even more important point here. It's not just that some amount of rule breaking, like the behavior of our barely speeding driver, is considered unobjectionable. The more fundamental point is that we often depend on rule breaking to make the world function. When former New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio proposed a zero-tolerance policy for jaywalking, economists were quick to point out that if anti-jaywalking rules were followed to the letter, pedestrian commute times would increase, and the city's social and economic life would suffer for it. We rely on this sort of routine rule-breaking to make society function efficiently. Perhaps no phenomenon illustrates the point more clearly than the work-to-rule labor action, in which unions exert pressure on management by following every rule in the handbook to the letter. Doing so slows organizational functions to a halt. But because employees are officially following the rules, it is difficult to discipline them. The fact that working to rule functions as a resistance tactic demonstrates by implication that most of the time, work practices do not fully accord with the rules. Indeed, organizations rely on the fact that they don't. Examples abound, particularly in the workplace. Organizational theorists have long observed that firms, in response to pressures for